Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately for my colleague at Labrie, MP from Labrie, he said something, and it's going to be reflective of some of the things I'm going to be bringing up all the evening tonight, because you're going to see a recurring theme, Mr. Speaker. When he said that there was nothing in the Ramshaw-Hoyd report that we should be concerned about. It found nothing wrong. It said on page 69 of the report, Mr. Speaker, it says, with respect to the National Conservation Authority, which is a statutory authority established under the National Conservation Authority Act, the Commission found that this corporation was not administered in accordance with the Act, which itself indeed in need of reform. Reports were not laid in Parliament in accordance of the Act to enable the representatives of the people to become aware of the operations of the authority. Said audit reports of 2003 to 2005 disclosed that there were mismanagement and irregularities in the conduct of the affairs of the authority, and the offences might have been committed with respect to the expenditure of public funds entrusted to the authority. Accounts were not properly kept, and they were kept, and where they were kept, the audited accounts indicated serious deficiencies in the systems of internal control. Money was improperly spent, causing loss to the government and the people of Saint Lucia. The auditors were not able to satisfy themselves that all the expenses in the authority had been reflected correctly, or that the record expenses represented valid transactions. And I can go on. So I think it's very unfair and, again, very dishonest on part of the member from Labrie to say that the report said nothing. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I believe a tremendous amount has been said here tonight. And so I think that my colleague, Minister of Infrastructure, and also the member from Castries North, Mr. Speaker, did a very, very good job of laying out what the project is. And so I'm not going to belabor that point. But what I want to really focus on in my rebuttal, Mr. Speaker, really is the process that we went through. And many of the members on my side have brought up examples specifically of why we believed that we're moving in the right direction, Mr. Speaker. So first of all, in coming into office, and gratefully, I was very grateful for the fact that we had actually interacted with the IFC and SLASPA prior to coming into government. And we had an opportunity to go through the presentation that they had made. And when we came into government, we had, I think, 2 or 3 meetings immediately with the IFC. And we also had the opportunity to meet with some of the concessionaires. And it became very clear to us that there still was not an agreement on the terms, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the concessionaires indicated that the $55 that was being assigned was insufficient to be able to proceed, and that if they were to proceed with the concession, they would want it upwards of $60. And even one of them had suggested as high as $65. We also talked about how the sharing of the revenue would be done, and my government was not satisfied with the answers, because we've seen these kinds of concessions, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, in other places. And what happens is that the concessionaire comes in, and in the same salaries that they're paying to local people, they now all of a sudden bring in foreigners and pay the same salary, if not more, in US dollars. And that when they see a lot of money that's on the account, they find all kinds of ways to create consultancies, investigations, all kinds of stuff, of which the government would not have any control over. And so therefore, it is not a safe conclusion to say that they're going to make money. You don't know that. You have no idea. But when we went through the details of the concession. The IFC's report basically said, Mr. Speaker, that in order to find the threshold level that the concession would have to include to be competitive, it made certain assumptions. The assumption is that a concessionaire would not accept less than a 30-year term. So it had to be a minimum of 30 years. It said that whatever numbers are agreed to, meaning the reason for the $55 or for the $60 is because the concessionaire would have to be able to earn a rate of return on his investment of at least 15%, if not more. It says in raising the financing, they would be willing to borrow 60% of the money. They would only put 40% of the money in their own. So it means they would have to borrow in excess of $288 million EC. That you would have to take consideration and put into input for the concession at least an 8% interest on an 11-year loan. Now, it's not to say that those are the numbers, but that's to say that in calculating the amount that you're going to give and the number of passengers you were expecting, that is the minimum that they would expect. And that once you have now put that into the minimum, you would now have to negotiate with the concessionaires in order to see how much more you would get. And then they said that SLASPA would share in some of those revenues. And that the intention was for the entity to pay a corporate tax. But as I said, corporate taxes are calculated on the basis of expenses and revenue. Now, in order for this to be an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, because the only way in which the borrowings of the airport would not be put on to the government's debt is if it was going to be an SPV, a special purpose vehicle. And in order for it to qualify as an SPV, government cannot be involved in the operations. So it has to be a completely separate entity, has to operate independently of government. Government doesn't have any influence on it. So once you give it the concession for 30 years, and you agree on what the head tax is going to be, they would now move forward on that basis. So when we looked at it, we tried to figure out whether this was a good deal. So when now Minister Joseph, or the member from Castries South East, and I had the opportunity to discuss this with the IFC, I remember very clearly, after we received the numbers, we asked, where is the added value in this process? Why is it that government would agree to give such a hefty concession, allow a third party to make all of this money? Where was all this money going? And I think that we were very frank at the meeting. We said we didn't care really who designed the building, as long as the building included pre-clearance facilities. Pre-clearance facilities is if one day the U.S. allows us to clear U.S. passengers, customs and immigration in Saint Lucia. We didn't care who was going to construct the building. And clearly, once there's a third party involved in establishing what the price of the building was going to be, we were comfortable with that. But the only part that we were concerned of is why we were going to be giving them $60. Because the $60 over 30 years, Mr. Speaker, is a hefty sum of money. So when you calculate that money, Mr. Speaker, so if you take into consideration that the 15% IRR, the 8% on 11 years, if you add 8 and 15, that's 23%. That's of I call it fat, that's built into the scenario. So they came up with the fact that let's use the government's numbers. let's not take the fact that it was more than likely going to end up at $60. Let's take the government numbers at $55. At $55 for 30 years, based on 400,000 arrivals. And that is what the number is today. So assuming over 30 years, there's absolutely no growth in those numbers. None. We're talking about $660 million, or 1.7 billion EC dollars. Whereas now, if you take 30 years, Mr. Speaker, and you multiply it by, again, $55, but we make the assumption here, and I don't think it's, Mr. Speaker, an unreasonable assumption. The assumption is that over a 30-year period, that we grow our arrivals to 500,000 arrivals. So on average, we would have grown by 100,000. If you take that number, which again, Mr. Speaker, I have to tell you, is an extremely conservative number. If you take into consideration, Mr. Speaker, that we believe that once the airport is open, with the potential of the hub for the cruise ships, which could bring in as much as 150,000 new passengers, if you take in the new rooms that we're going to be developing, then we think $500,000 is extremely conservative. But I want, and I'd rather us be conservative. I don't want anybody to accuse that we're exaggerating. So if you take the 30 years, $55, and 500,000 people, it comes to $2.2 billion in revenue. So after discussions, my government chose not to go in that direction. In meeting with the concessionaires, they all justified why they needed to make that money. When I asked, why would we do it, I was told, because you're going to get more airlines coming to Saint Lucia. Now, I know the only way to get more airlines to come to Saint Lucia, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, is by more hotel rooms. But none of this money was going to build hotel rooms. All this money was going to was to build the airport. What is not included in these numbers, Mr. Speaker, is the duty-free concessions. So all the duty-free shops, rent and everything else, that money would go to the concessionaire. The leader of the opposition was very correct. The only monies that were coming to the government were some of the smaller taxes, which amounted to no more than $5, which they currently collect. $5. $5. I have it right here. $5. $5. $5 per passenger is what. Okay. It's an IFC report. I'd be happy to give you a copy. No problem. Okay? We can please circulate that to the opposition. So, Mr. Speaker, in making the decision not to proceed, and I want to say that even if we proceeded, all the government had left us was 3 concessionaires, in which the final decision still had not been made, or we had not agreed on a final position. So we were still a ways away from agreeing, because in fact, none of them were presenting the plans based on the airport design. So they had not even done that as yet. We were strictly talking about the concession. And that once we had the concession, they would then make the determination, okay, what the final design was going to be in moving forward. So we were still years away, if we were continuing down the pace that we were going, to build the airport. So what we were facing is the clear reality that we'd taken so long to have built this airport in the first place. And I think that the point that the member from Castries North made was very relevant. That in St. Vincent, they built an airport out of the sea. took down 2 hills, moved the whole thing, built the airport with no financing to start off with, and what? Finished it before us. And all we were talking about is building an airport terminal. We're not even talking about building a new airport. And we're still talking. What did we know? We knew that if we don't build the airport, we can't get any new hotel rooms. If we don't build the airport, there's no possibility of getting the cruise ship hub in Saint Lucia. So in essence, the airport itself had become a constraint to growth, at a bottleneck. And so every day that goes by and that don't have a new airport terminal, we're losing opportunity cost. So even when the member from Labrie was talking about a hub, we made it very clear in my first presentation. We believe that we can be a hub for Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Martinique, and Dominica. The reason is because they don't have enough hotel rooms. We can create the volume. And the fact is that we're closer to those locations than Barbados. I made that point. The planes coming from Mustique and from Union Island and from Canawan, it's over an hour flight to Barbados. And the facilities in Barbados are grossly inadequate for in-transit passengers. We spoke about how long it takes you to walk all the way through, walk all the way to recheck in, and what they're going. So intended to, in our design, is to design it so that we can facilitate that traffic. In fact, today, Vincentians clear their customs and immigration here in St. Lucia. So while they're waiting, we actually have their officers here, so when they arrive in St. Vincent, they're pre-cleared already. That's the relationship we have with those countries. And the fact is even though St. Vincent has an international airport, it is going to be years before that airport is going to be used to its full capacity, because they don't have hotel rooms. So even the flight that's coming in on American Airlines is once a week. We now have 2 flights a week. We have daily flights year-round from Atlanta, daily flights year-round from Charlotte, daily flights year-round from New York. We've now got 2 flights coming in out of Chicago, and we're growing that number. We're up to 5 flights a week out of Toronto. We have 14 flights a week on BA and Virgin. So St. Lucia actually has critical mass, and if we're now able to add more rooms, bring the cruise ships in, we believe that we can grow it even more significantly than we have. So there's no point reacting to it. It's to anticipate that potential. So what did we do? We met with the government of Taiwan, indicated to them that we needed their help. We talked about a new relationship, a strategic relationship, and one in which we could take advantage of the fact that at one point Taiwan used to have the 2nd largest reserves in the world. Today I believe they're number 4. So if we could offer them a business opportunity in which they could make a higher interest rate on the money they're currently earning, because interest rates are extremely low, and we could put in the security for them, and the intention was, and that was the initial agreement, is that this was going to be a loan from SLASPA to the Exim Bank. And that what we were signing is SLASPA was assigning the revenues from the airport tax to them. At the last minute, what was expected? What was expected? What was expected is that they wanted to get a guarantee. So here is the analysis that the government went through.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, the Prime Minister circulated a document to illustrate a point. Can he kindly just indicate to me where in the document did you see it, what he quoted? Can you just indicate to me which page, where it is? Because I'm trying to follow the argument you're making, and you circulated a document to prove your point. Can you just indicate where you saw this in the document?
Mr. Speaker, this is a summary document that was provided by the IEC when we first came in order to be able to break down the concession.
I don't have a copy.
And in fact, it says approach to setting the reserve price. So it's exactly what it is. It is the methodology that was used in order to be able to make the determination as to how much money should be put in. But that is what I've said. Does it not say here?
Honorable members.
Mr. Chairman.
In any event, Mr. Prime Minister, I don't have a copy, so I can't even comment on the document that you so indicated.
Well, I circulated, Mr. Speaker. I mean, it is a document from the IFC that was prepared for the airport project in order to determine what the concession was going to be. And it's very specific here. I'm surprised members on the other side don't understand what is being said here. Okay?
Mr. Speaker, I'm asking you to show me.
But it says it right here. It says, scenario 2, private sector investment. Assess the concession free under PPP scenario where the concessionaire, and lays out what the minimum requirement would be in order to be able to give. That is exactly what I said.
Honorable members, honorable members, honorable members, honorable members, honorable members.
Right here. It says expects an IRR of 15% or higher. I'm sorry if you can't read.
Honorable members, let's get something straight here. Let's get something straight here. Honorable Prime
But
Minister.
the truth hurts sometimes.
Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable Leader of the. No.
I asked him to withdraw that. Nobody's lying. I've given him the document we're referring to.
Honorable Prime Minister, please. Member for Castries South, please. Member for Castries South, what was your point of order you were?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister made a point and he quoted a figure which was what was agreed upon that would be paid under the arrangement that we would have had under the IFC contract agreement. And he named a figure that he said would be granted to the government. And I asked him, where did you get that figure from? Because the agreement that the Honourable Member from Castries East has been referring to clearly states what the revenue would be. The Prime Minister says he has the document. He circulated it.
In fact, he said it was 1.5 billion overall, and he repeated the figure.
Actually, yeah. But I mean, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the document, and all I am going to say to the Prime Minister, because you know we need to move on. We have many more debates tonight. Mr. Speaker, we in this House, Mr. Speaker, we are engaging in intense debate, trying to justify and to defend. Just provide information. Just, Mr. Speaker, if you ask to provide information, do not try to mislead the House and provide documents that are not relevant to what you say and not proving what you're saying. All I ask the Honourable Member from Miko South to say, point out to me what page did he see the figure? Where? It's not there. I have the document in my hand. Sabina News and such, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I would be very happy to repeat the numbers. So if the member from Castries South can look on the first page and look in the box which it says approach to setting the reserve price. Do we understand what that theory is? Do we understand what that is, Mr. Speaker, through you? So let's go by bullet point by bullet point. So it says the objective, set a reserve price equal to the minimum acceptable concession fee to be offered by the concessionaire to SLASPA. So let me interpret that in English. It means what is the minimum amount that would have to be offered to SLASPA in order to make this thing feasible. It then says equate the net payments to the country under public procurement to the total payments received under the PPP. So what it's doing, it's comparing side by side. Do you have the document? Yes. So on the left-hand side, scenario 1 is public procurement. Public procurement means that the government will actually be doing the project itself. And then scenario 2 is the private sector investment. So if you're going to do a PPP, these are the things that you would have to take into consideration in order to be able to achieve a PPP. So before you go out to tender, these are the minimum concessions that you're going to have to be prepared to give. Exactly. So what does it say? Assess the concession fee under PPP scenario where the concessionaire, 1, it says, operate the airport for 30 years and was responsible for the capital works. That's what I said. 2, expects an IRR of 15% or higher, meaning the concessionaire will expect to get a return on his investment of at least 15% or more. The third thing, raises financing of $288 million with a debt-to-equity ratio of 60-40. I said the concessionaire would have to bring at least 40% of the money to the table, and the remaining amount of money he would borrow. It then went on to say, debt financing at 8% over 11 years. So you would have to calculate that revenue and add it on, because in the concession, it would have to be able to cover that amount. That's what I heard. It says charges on the ASC. Here's the part maybe that's confusing him, sir, is it says the charges on the ASC, okay, which was the airport service charge of $149 to passengers. Government receives the security charge of $13 per passenger. Exactly what we said. 149 EC dollars equates to $55 US. The $13 equates to the $5 US. So the $55 goes to the concessionaire, the $13 EC, which is $5 US, of which he told me that that's not true, goes to them. I then said...
Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Prime Minister, because I was looking for the $5. So you've just explained what the $5 is. You may proceed, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm going to be very generous tonight, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not going to ask the other sides to apologize and withdraw the statements they made, but we shall continue.
Yes, gentle.
So in terms of making the decision, we met with the Taiwanese.
Honorable members, let's get back to where we were this morning. I know it's nighttime and we may want to head to our beds, but let's get back to... Okay. Very well. Mr. Prime Minister, continue, please.
It says 100% of what I said. And I'll be happy to repeat it for the member from Vieux-Fort South one more time if he wishes. So, after negotiating with the Taiwanese government, they came up with an offer in which they could give us a loan of $100 million US, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. And the terms of the loan would be a 5-year moratorium, means we would only pay interest for the first 5 years. And then we would pay the principal and the interest for the next 15 years. So when we take that amount, so if you take the 20 years and we agree to assign $35, not $55, not $55, we agree to assign $35 of the head tax. So the head tax now, for 20 years at $35, comes out to a grand total of $280 million based on 400,000 passengers. So to equate that under the 30-year scenario, that is a comparison of $660 million US to $280 million US, or $1.7 billion under the 30 years and the $55, and $747 million if you use $35 for the 20 years at 400,000 passengers. But I want to also now take into fact, because I want to be fair, what happens if we're able to increase the average arrivals to 500,000 under the scenario with the Taiwanese loan? It means that we will be able to raise, we'll go from $15 million to $17.5 million. So what would happen is we actually would end up paying the loan back in 12 years. Okay? All right, this is an important fact here, Mr. Speaker. Under the concession, you can't opt out halfway. You can't say the concessionaire has made too much money, and therefore, we're going to cancel the concession. So regardless of how well we do in numbers, all of the money continues to go to concession, less whatever the profit is that's shared, and that there's a percentage of the revenue that is shared. I believe that they said 15%. So it's a very simple calculation that we went through. If we can pay back the loan in 12 years, it means that we would save 18 years. So in those 18 years, at 500,000 passengers, at $55, the concessionaire would earn an additional $1.3 billion. That's the cost to the state. And as we've said, is that they would have paid back for the investment long ago. And when we were having the meeting, this is the bulk of what we kept on saying. Where is the added value? Why would we do this? If we are here that we're so broke, we don't have enough money, why would we allow somebody else to earn our tax money? Now, Mr. Speaker, this is another concept I'm asking and appealing everybody to also understand. The average head tax in the Caribbean is $100. And Saint Lucia was charging $25. We make this point. Antigua was charging $100. The airfare from New York to Antigua was exactly the same as the airfare from New York to Saint Lucia. Yet, we were $75 less money than they were per passenger. If we need any more proof of that, when we first introduced the $35, there was no change in the amount of arrivals. In fact, when the then government decided to take back the $35 off, there was no change in arrivals. In fact, it went down. And to really prove our point, when we put back the $35, plus we put on another $38, arrivals went up by 11%. And the reason for that, Mr. Speaker, is because the tourists who are buying or coming to Saint Lucia are not buying an airline ticket by itself. They don't know how much they're paying for the airline ticket. They're buying a package. It includes the airfare, it includes their hotel stay, it includes their food and beverage. They have no idea how much they're paying. So if you take the average length of stay, which is a normal statistic of 10 days, and you increase the tax by $73, it's $7 per day per person. And we knew that that's not going to impact us. So it makes the decision that the former government made to reduce the $35 even more absurd. Because if there is ever a term called foregone revenue, that is it. And I know that there are members of the opposition's party that went ad nausea to try to explain it to the then Minister of Finance, the error in his decision, and he would not listen and proceeded because it was a political promise. And the fact is, the tax, 85% of the tax is being paid by tourists. So when we now look at the numbers, it's a very, very simple decision to have been made. So the member from Castries East also brought up that what happens if there is a loss of revenue? So we have historical numbers, Mr. Speaker, which shows that over a 30-year period of time, that arrivals have increased on average by 2.5%. Sorry, by 1.5% over 30 years, every year. We also have major shocks that we can look at. When we had the crash of 9/11, when we had the financial crisis, when we had Hurricane Thomas, we had all those included in the numbers. And we saw that tourism recovered extremely quickly. So if we look at the $35 is going to generate $14 million in revenue. Remember, for the first 5 years, all we're going to be paying is the interest, which is about $6.6 million, $5 million, sorry, of interest a year. By the 5th year, we'll start paying back the principal, and if you take the $100 million and you divide it by 15, it ends up coming to $6.6 million. So in essence, we're going to have to repay $11.6 million a year. On 400,000 passengers, at $35, we make $14 million, which gives us an excess amount of $2.4 million. So built into this model is an additional amount of money to cover the eventuality that we have any kind of shortage of income. But furthermore, we're exploring now to be able to take an insurance policy to cover for loss of income. Because again, we want SLASPA and we want the government to be protected. So to be doubly protected, that we don't have to have an overburden, is to be able to take that prevention. So as I was saying earlier, the decision now to go ahead with the Taiwanese was also helped because of the process. That in taking the loan from them and taking it from an Exim bank and taking it at these concessional rates, we also agreed that their construction company would do the project. It would give them the added comfort that the project was going to be run properly. So in essence, they're going to provide the financing, we're going to work with them on the design, and they're going to be able to do the construction. Now, the question becomes, what is the experience of OECC? OECC did the airport in St. Vincent. OECC did the airport in Haiti. OECC did airports and roads in Guatemala. In fact, the OECC is working on a major expansion of the Taiwanese airport. I think it's to cover something like 44 million passengers a year. This is a company with tremendous amount of experience. So this process also allowed us to move faster. Because if we had to have rejected the situation with IFC and gone back and renegotiated, we would still be in the negotiations. And the fact is, we don't have time to waste. The other thing that is very important to understand in this, and again, let me see if I can get it here to read again. No, the one with, oh, it's right here. The intention of coming here to this House, Mr. Speaker, and again, this point was made by the member from Castries North. And it says, with the approval of Parliament, the minister may guarantee in such manner, on such conditions as he or she may think fit, the repayments of the principal of the payments of interest and other charges on any authorized borrowing by the authority. So in fact, no work has begun. We have received the approvals on the loan conditions. The appointment of the contractor has not been done. So we have come to the House when we're supposed to come to the House, Mr. Speaker. We're supposed to come to the House and seek the approval of the House for the guarantee. And the guarantee, the terms of the guarantee are right there. This is a long difference from what took place on the Rushmel, which came years afterwards. And not even Rushmel. When we came back in, when we were in opposition, they developed a thing called belated guarantees. I challenge the member from Beaufort South, who was the former Minister of Finance, to tell me anywhere in our legislation that speaks about a belated guarantee. A belated guarantee to come after the fact? Well, I'm very proud of the fact that we are being transparent. We have shown exactly the money that we're borrowing, where it's going. And the fact is that the House has no business choosing who the contractor is going to be. That's not the role of the House. In this particular instance, it is the role of SLASPA. I know of no other time, Mr. Speaker, in which we have come to the House to select a contractor or subcontractors. Not on CDB loans, not on anybody's loans, that there is a process of governance which establishes that. We came here to seek the guarantee. And what I don't really like, Mr. Speaker, because this is very, very important. This is where we've made mistakes in the past. This is where we've made mistakes in the past. That we've allowed the opposition to put a cloud of uncertainty about what we're doing. And they came to the same House. In fact, it was the same member from Castries South, Mr. Speaker, who talked about a clause in the bill. The clause says, the items and conditions proposed by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, Taiwan, are accepted. And he has a difficulty with that. Can you please circulate this? What I have with me, Mr. Speaker, is that in 2014 statutory instrument number 92 was the resolution of the Parliament to borrow for capital of recurrent expenditure for the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. And it says, whereas it is provided by Section 39 of the Finance Administration Cap that the Minister of Finance may, by resolution of the Parliament, borrow money for the bank or other financial institution for capital expenditure of government, and whereas it is provided that Section 41 of the Act that a guarantee involving any financial liability is not binding upon the government unless that guarantee is given in accordance with the enactment of or unless approved by resolution of Parliament. And whereas it is further provided under Section 42(1) of the Finance Administration Act that there shall be charged upon the paid out of the Consolidated Fund debt charges for which the government is liable. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow $20 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, Taiwan, for the purpose of financing the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project to restore the capacity and facilities and the healthcare needs of the southern region of Saint Lucia. And whereas the loan payment shall commence after the grace period of 3 years has expired, and whereas the interest will be paid in the amount of $206,000 annually during the grace period and thereafter at the 6-month London interim bank offered rate. You get that? It's a variable rate. And whereas the terms and conditions proposed by the Export Bank of the Republic of China are accepted, be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow $20 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, Taiwan, for the purpose of financing the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project to restore the capacity and the facility of the healthcare needs of the southern region of St. Lucia. Be it further resolved that the loan payment shall commence after the grace period of 3 years has expired. The interest shall be paid in the amount of $206,000 annually during the grace period and thereafter at 6-month London interbank offered rate. So the then Prime Minister was able to organize even a better rate than we did because we're getting LIBOR plus 1.5. And in terms, the conditions proposed by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China are accepted. So I'm not so sure where, but the point that I'm making, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we see the same scenario over and over and over again. That all they try to do is impugn irregularity. They try to impugn all kinds of things. They were in government. They paid a man $1 million. They kept it a secret. Nobody knew who Bob Lindquist was. Nobody knew who Bob Lindquist was. I say that repeatedly. Nobody knew who Bob Lindquist was. The people who knew Bob Lindquist was the Attorney General and the Cabinet Secretary. Not even the Accountant General. The Accountant General was given a document. You know what the Accountant General was given? A copy of the signature page, and was told that if she wants to see the contract, she can go to the AG's office anytime she wants to see it. And I'm sure the member, who was the former Minister of Finance, knows how inappropriate that is.
Really?
You would.
Wait till I speak about it. You just wait.
I can't wait for the member to speak about it. because there are many things he's chosen not to speak about. And so all of a sudden now, you have an inquest that is taking place. You also have a letter that was written by the Attorney General to the Department of Justice saying that a member on our side was a person of interest. Now, I have no idea when an Attorney General can all of a sudden take in criminal matters. I always thought that that was the DPP. And then what did she write? She wrote a letter to suggest the Minister of Infrastructure threaten the director of SLASPA that if he didn't do a certain thing, that he would be fired. But again, I know that the member from Vieux-Fort South, who was also the former Minister of Finance, knows better, because he would know that the only person that can hire and fire the director is the board. And in fact, the board does it with the minister. And the minister, in reference, is not the Minister of Infrastructure, is the Minister of Finance. So explain to me how that works. That the general manager of SLASPA is threatened. He, by the way, Mr. Speaker, does not vote on the board. So he doesn't vote on the board, but pressure is going to be applied to him to put a name on the list. How does that happen? And then when we go through to see how the board is appointed, the board is appointed the same way it always appointed. The chairman of the SLASPA board is always the director of finance, who is then Isaac Anthony. The deputy chairperson is always the permanent secretary of infrastructure, who was Alison Jean. The attorney generals appoint somebody in their own name. The business community appoints people. So this is not a board that's prescribed by government. So how does all of a sudden what was being suggested by the then Attorney General in her letter ever happen? And the fact is, Mr. Speaker, the only person who made that person a person of interest was the Attorney General. In fact, the Department of Justice in the United States of America has never made that person of interest. All that was brought in by the Department of Justice was we requested information. And we created a story to the Department of Justice to justify getting that information. But after 4 years and $1 million US, where's the charges? Where's the changes to the legislation? What has happened? So when we talk about that we want to be an inquiry, the point that the member from from Castries South makes reference to, I never made any comments about an inquiry into phone bills. What I made an inquiry into was how is it that Bob Lindquist was appointed and that I came in as the Minister of Finance and nobody reported it to me? Not one person. Not one person. Not one person. What I've asked for, and I continue, and we are doing an inquiry, Mr. Speaker, is into how the fact is that when I came in as Prime Minister of this country and as the Minister of Finance, and an expenditure of $1 million and a major investigation was being done, that not once was I informed. I love to hear it. Please do. So, Mr. Speaker, the biggest issue at hand here, and what I want to be able to say, Mr. Speaker, is that it's the opportunity cost. If we do not fix the airport, Mr. Speaker, we are not going to be able to grow. We've reached the end of our tether with the airport. And it's the intention of my government to be transparent, to be accountable, and to put the best deal on the table for the people of Saint Lucia. And I would say to you, allocating $35 with the terms that have been given to us generously by the Taiwanese government facilitates this development. And the ability to be able to use OACC as the main contractor, which will be executed and managed by SLASPA. And also that they have acquired HIA in order to be able to do it. So, end of the day, right? The end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we are ready to move forward. we have come to Parliament in advance of the project commencing. In advance of the project commencing, we have laid out what the guarantee is for. We genuinely believe that all precautions have been taken. And I want to report one more thing. Preliminary indications, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, are that we're seeing
Honorable members,
that we've seen an 8%.
Mr. Prime Minister, let me just, honorable members, keep the temperature. Very well. Mr. Prime Minister, continue.
We want to play the video of what he said, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say that preliminary numbers suggest that manufacturing is up 8.6%, that we've seen a 21% increase in banana exports, that we've seen a 16% drop in construction for the first 6 months. We've seen a drop in the unemployment rate of a further 1% to 20.9. We've seen a slight increase in our youth unemployment rate, which is at 38%. We've seen an inflation rate of 2%. The other thing that's very interesting, Mr. Speaker, is that despite all the numbers that the opposition have so cleverly tried to put together to amass a story that doesn't exist, we're actually seeing a substantial improvement in the financing of the financial affairs of the state. We're seeing that there is, as of midterm, an overall balance of 0.5% of GDP, and our public debt, as we speak today, is 63%. We're expecting by the end of the year that overall deficit is going to be about minus 1.2%, which is a dramatic increase from what we've seen before. And that we're expecting now with some of the borrowings that we're doing that the debt to GDP is going to be risen to 64.2%. And I want to bring that up because here we are in a catch-22 situation. If we do not borrow the money and fix the airport, because I believe going the concessionaire route, we've shown how much money it's going to cost us. I was going to get there. It was very telling that the member from Castries East would have used Jamaica. So when the airport was initially being done, Jamaica's debt to GDP was 150%. Today, as we speak, as of 2017, they were 115%. And I think when I saw Prime Minister Holness, they told me they were hovering around 100%. So the fact is that they did not have a choice. They had absolutely zero fiscal space. And when we were looking at this concession, we went to the Bahamas. We went to Jamaica. So here you have had a huge increase in arrivals in Jamaica. And look at the level of expenditure at the airport. This is why the Jamaica government chose to change the concessionaire, because they weren't happy. It wasn't working out. The lines were all, yes, it used to be Vancouver Airports Authority. No, the Montego Bay. Okay, so when you go to Montego Bay, Mr. Chairman, the lines are going all the way out through the door. And they've had a concessionaire. It's not worked out. It's not working. There's nobody who's going to take an interest in your own business like you. And the airport is too much of a strategic advantage for us. It is a critical gateway to Saint Lucia. We cannot afford to allow a third party to be in charge of how we proceed. But at the same time, I absolutely recognize, Mr. Speaker, that we have to be cautious and we cannot overexpose ourselves. And that is why we've chosen the process we have. And certainly getting the money from the Taiwanese government has facilitated that. And yes, we're having to take on the debt. But the question becomes, do you not take on the debt and pay out $1.3 billion of additional revenue over 30 years? Or do you take on the debt to GDP? And when you take on the debt to GDP, Mr. Speaker, it allows the country to grow. And in that growth, your debt to GDP will drop. So are you going to take that chance? Because if you don't fix it, you cannot grow. Mr. Speaker, let me repeat that again. If we do not fix the airport, we cannot grow. And that is a major, major constraint to growth in this country right now. And we have no choice but to be able to proceed with this. And we have the greatest amount of confidence in SLASPA. We have the greatest amount of the structures and the consultants that they've brought in order to facilitate and oversee the development. We're also very excited that the Taiwanese have agreed to allow OECC, which is an international construction company with a proven track record, to be able to manage the project. It is not for us in government to make any of those decisions. That is under the authority of SLASPA. So, Mr. Speaker, that is where we're going, and I look forward to the support of all members of this House on this absolutely critical project to move Saint Lucia and to build a new country. Thank you.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to guarantee a loan in the amount of US $100 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, Taiwan, by the Saint Lucia Air and Seaports Authority for the purpose of financing the HIA International Airport Redevelopment Project. Be it further resolved that A, the loan is repayable over a period of 20 years from the date of the first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of the 5-year grace period. B, the interest is payable at a rate of 6-month London Interbank Offered Rate plus 1.5% per annum. C, the loan payment shall commence after the grace period of 5 years has expired. D, the interest shall be paid in the amount of US $2,195,000 semi-annually during the grace period and thereafter at the 6-month London Interbank Offered Rate. And E, the terms and conditions like proposed by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, Taiwan are accepted. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. No. Madam Clerk.
Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony, how do you vote?
No.
Honorable, okay, Honorable Allen Chastanet, how do you vote?
Yes.
Honorable Sean Edward, how do you vote?
No.
Honorable Edmund Estefan, how do you vote? Aye. Honorable Bradley Felix, how do you vote? Yes. Honorable Ernest Hilaire, how do you vote? Honorable Ezekiel Joseph, how do you vote?
Yes.
Honorable Guy Joseph, how do you vote?
Yes.
Honorable Leonard Montoot, how do you vote?
Yes.
Honorable Philip J. Pierre, how do you vote?
No.
Honorable Gail Rigobert, how do you vote? Yes. Honorable Harold Stanislas, how do you vote?
Yes.
When they propose the questions,
You were there.
Procedure Baptiste, how do you vote?
But he wasn't there. Yes, he was there. He was not there. He was not there.
Honorable members, with a vote of 8 to 4, the ayes have it. This motion is passed.
I took him out and I put him. I took him out and I put him.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided under Section 39(1) of the Finance Administration Act 1501 that the Minister of Finance may, by resolution of Parliament, borrow money from a bank or other financial institution for the capital expenditure of government. And whereas it is further provided under Section 42(1) of the Finance Administration Act 1501 that there shall be charged and paid out of the consolidated fund debt charges for which the government is liable. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow the sum of $50 million US dollars from the Export-Import Bank of China, Taiwan, for the purpose of financing the Road Improvement Maintenance Program, the Infrastructure Repairs to Schools, and the Housing Development Program, consisting of $42 million US to finance the Road Improvement and Maintenance Program, $4 million US to finance the Infrastructure Repairs to Schools, and $4 million to finance the Housing and Development Program. And whereas the principal amount is repayable in 20 years from the date of the first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a 5-year grace period. And whereas the interest is payable at a rate of 6 months London Interbank offered plus 1.5% per annum. And whereas the loan payment shall commence after the grace period of 5 years has expired. And whereas the interest shall be paid in the amount of US $1,097,500 semi-annually during the grace period, and thereafter at 6-month London Interbank offered rate. And whereas the terms and conditions proposed by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, Taiwan are accepted, be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the sum of US $50 million from the Export-Import Bank of Republic China, Taiwan for the purpose of financing the Road Improvements and Maintenance Program, the Infrastructure Repairs to Schools, and the Housing Development Program, consisting of US $42 million to finance the Road Improvement Maintenance Program, Phase 4, US $4 million to finance the Infrastructure Repairs to Schools, and US $4 million to finance the Housing Development Program. Be it further resolved that the principal amount is repayable in 20 years from the date of first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of 5-year grace period, and the interest payable at a rate of 6-month London Interbank offered rate plus 1.5% per annum. The loan payment shall commence after the grace period of 5 years has expired, and the interest shall be paid in the amount of US $1,097,500, semi-annually during the grace period, and thereafter at 6-month London Interbank offered rate, and in terms and conditions proposed by the Export-Import Bank of Republic China, Taiwan are accepted. Mr. Speaker, the resolution before Parliament is to seek the approval of a loan of $50 million. $42 million is to go for road repairs, $4 million to infrastructure repairs for schools, and $4 million for the Housing Development Program. The funds from this loan will be allocated in 3 main areas: road improvement, maintenance, infrastructure repair to schools, and the housing development. Under the road improvement, the main objective of the road improvement and maintenance program is to improve the quality of the road network in Saint Lucia through strategic maintenance of primary roads and 55 kilometers of secondary roads. The primary and secondary road network is quickly deteriorating and is in urgent need of repairs and restorative work in order to prevent further deterioration of the road network and lessen the hardship on road users. At present, approximately 52% of the road network is classified as good or fair, with the remaining 48% being classified as poor or, unfortunately, very poor. The main objectives of the road improvement and maintenance program are as follows. 1, improve and strengthen the general conditions of the country's roads. 2, maintain and improve the safety of road users. 3, minimize the cost of maintenance to commuters. And 4, to reduce commuting time by creating and maintaining suitable road conditions. The roads to be repaired and rehabilitated include sections of the East Coast Road, St. Jude's Highway, Chaussee Road, Marshall Road and Waterworks Road, the John Compton Highway, various streets in Castries, Groselet Junction to Cap Estate Entrepot, Vide Bouteille, Forestier Road, Mark Road, Souffre Fonce-Jacques, Blasha Road, Saltibus Main Road, Castries Groselet Bypass Roads, Auger Saint-Just, Opicon La Ressource, Pierre Pierrot Bellevue, Fond Daisy, Marisil Grand Riviera Union. Infrastructure repairs to the schools is over 70% of the schools in St. Lucia are over 40 years old. Financial have resulted in less funds, due to our financial situation, has resulted in less funds being allocated to school repair and rehabilitating, resulting in increased instances of cases of compromised infrastructure, poor electricals, poor air quality, and pest infection. Also, aging infrastructure has resulted in higher energy and maintenance costs. The Department of Education has had to resort to a number of small interventions to alleviate the infrastructural pressures. With this in mind, the Government of St. Lucia will undertake a project targeted at a number of schools throughout the island to conduct comprehensive repairs, thereby making school plants more comfortable for occupants, minimizing health and safety risk, and making school plants more climate resilient and energy efficient. The objective of the project is to provide safe and conducive facilities for students and teachers in public schools island-wide. It is expected that upon completion of this project, there will be generally lower utility costs, vastly improved infrastructure, and safer, more resilient school plants. Mr. Speaker, for the Housing Development Program, results of the most recent census conducted in St. Lucia revealed that housing stock in St. Lucia is short by approximately 14,000 houses. This housing deficit is a result of the rising cost to build homes and the rising cost to develop land. The north of the island, particularly Castries and Gros-Islet, is already saturated, resulting in mounting pressure on infrastructure and the road network. The proposed housing development program is expected to bring some relief by increasing the housing stock by approximately 250 houses. The houses project will be located in the Shock Gardens estate. The intention is to provide residential service lots and housing units for families and individuals with the close proximity to the Castries Development Basin and established transportation routes. The goal is to complete the development by March of 2021, inclusive of the completion of concrete roads and drains, installation of water and electricity, and the construction of homes. This project will create a mixed use of housing and lots amounting to 252. This will likely reduce the potential and occurrence of unplanned squatter development and ease in the housing deficit. The above three projects will be financed by a loan from the government of $50 million. I've indicated what the principal amounts were and the amounts of the interest. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a critical project. And as indicated, we're using the gas tax of $1.50, which generates about $30 million a year currently, in order to be able to finance the loan. And it's the intention of my government to allocate another $20 million a year out of the $30 million that we're earning to the Ministry of Infrastructure in order to be able to develop even a greater number of roads than we currently are undertaking. This is another very important initiative. Again, roads are a constraint to growth. We're seeing all over the island that the roads have been neglected for years. And many people are complaining about the standard of roads. If we just take the back roads in Gros-Islet as an alternative route, a tremendous amount of money is going to have to be invested in growing that area. We've also indicated that this is not going to be the final initiative that we're going to have on roads. We are working aggressively to be able to obtain the financing for the North-South Highway. In fact, the remaining amount of money on the airport tax, $28, is what we've been preserving in order to be able to start the financing for the North-South Highway. And we would like to start with the first phase, which is from the Darren Sammy Stadium to Dennery, with a major artery going through the Allen Bousquet Highway. So again, I want to thank the government of China, Taiwan, Republic of China, Taiwan, for assisting us in borrowing this money, and to give us the terms in which we can create additional capital during the 5-year period in order that we can use to be able to build even further projects. I'm extremely excited. We started seeing the beginning of the works for the Ministry of Education. I think we can all see the difference that it's made in many of the schools, and we're looking to continue that program. And clearly, we want to be able to tackle housing. This is a critical area that has been underdeveloped for many, many years in St. Lucia. So I'm looking forward to the support of my parliamentary colleagues in approving this loan, which will be executed by the Ministry of Infrastructure, by the Ministry of Education, and by the Ministry of Housing. Thank you.